Designing for VR, November the 9th, 2016. No, just go ahead. Just would like Greg to sit there. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Design Work event the day after the election results, which, if you're like me, you probably got quite a surprise. I know there's a protest going on just a few blocks away, so that might have delayed a lot of people arriving. I know Timothy West, who was meant to be here, who I work with at Unity, couldn't make it, so wonderful Greg here is here instead of her, if you saw her there. And Amy Stellhorn, who normally moderates, unfortunately has to be in Salt Lake City for a presentation tomorrow morning, so she couldn't make it either. So who am I? My name is Rick Byrne. If you've been to any of these design work events before, you'll know that I am the co-chair for programming of the AIGA's board. In fact, quick show of hands, who here has been to a design work event before? A few people. Who's been to an AIGA event before? Show of hands. Okay. And then who here works in VR already? One hand at the back. Oh, 2, 3 here. Does anyone work in gaming by any chance? No? Okay. So we both work is this on? We both work in at Unity, which is a gaming engine, but also builds a lot of things for VR, which includes a huge new deal that we've just done with Facebook and Google, which is great because we have somebody from Facebook and somebody just like Google here tonight who've worked in VR as well. They're trying to be very relevant. VR is very much the topic for 2016. It's, as you've seen, it's been everywhere. After last night's results, I feel like I'm living in VR now. It's definitely a totally unexpected result by many people. Although Hillary got more votes. That's the irony of it. I had to explain that to one of my sons this morning, that like, even though she got more votes, she didn't win. And he found that very hard to understand. And luckily I was also teaching him, that it's okay, life goes on, but I'm not going to harpoon myself with that giant harpoon on the wall over there. I'll carry on with life. And in fact, my other son, after he went to bed, around 8:30, the results weren't called. He came out about 10 minutes later saying, "Dad, I'm really scared. I'm scared of two things." I said, "Okay," no, he's only 6. He said, "One is, I'm scared that Trump might win. Okay. And the other thing I'm scared of is werewolves might be real." So I was like, okay, well, werewolves don't exist. And then I was kind of stumped as to how to reply to the Trump thing, saying, well, he might not win. In my mind, I knew he was probably going to win at that stage. So, kids' perspective on things. I would just like to thank the volunteers for setting up tonight. Volunteers, if you'd like to stand up, if everyone would like to put your hands together for the wonderful volunteers. Siri Napa at the back, who is here Monday to Fridays helping sort out a lot of stuff in the background. She helps get tickets and everything organized for tonight. Then, pardon me. So before I introduce our wonderful panelists, so many of you have not been to an AIJ event or a Design Work event before. Design Work is a series of career-based topics under the AIJ. So I'd like you to spend 2 minutes talking to each other. Firstly, turning to somebody you don't know rather than somebody you do know. Spend a minute each and talk about why you're here tonight, what you'd like to get out of tonight, and what is it about VR that has attracted you. Remember, tonight's topic is all about moving into VR. As we saw from the show of hands, only 3 people are actually working in VR already. So I'm assuming you're all some kind of designer who wants to be in VR or just find out what should you do if you wanted to get into VR. So we'll just spend 2 minutes, turn to somebody you don't know, and just tell your life story, whatever it is, and why you're here, and what you want to get out of tonight. So if one person is spoken, switch to the other person. Okay, so we'll begin to round up here. Move on to the wonderful panelists. It's like a pub. It's like being in a pub. Like last orders? Anyone? Last orders? Okay, everyone, shall we begin to wrap it up there and head on to the main content of our tonight's talk. So you've spoken to each other for at least 2 minutes and found out why you're here. Would a few people like to just raise their hand and just say why they're here tonight? So, oh, that was your hair. Sorry, I thought you were raising your hand. If you're in an auction, you would have bid. Why are you here tonight?
I was just telling her I've experienced a lot of VR. And as someone who has done a lot of video, right now it feels like a lot of great B-roll, and I'm interested in storytelling, and I haven't seen a lot of that. So I'm interested to see if anyone's gone beyond the sexy footage.
Well, I know David will be able to answer that. He's done an interesting story in VR recently, but I'll let him explain that. Anyone else like to volunteer?
I'm currently working on a side project for the designing for the HoloLens, and I'd really like to get more information how different devices interact with the HoloLens, or vice versa, or any other VR
Cool.
hardware out there.
Well, that's one of the questions I already have written down for tonight. Anyone else like to volunteer questions, sir?
Yeah, we're gamers and big fans of Unity too.
Oh, well, there you go. Came to the right place.
Right? So we're interested in seeing how you can take practical applications from games and bring them to social.
Social. Interesting. There you go, panelists, especially in VR. And VR. Because Gabe, who I'll let him explain, but he actually works at Facebook, so he might be able to answer that better than me. VR at Facebook. One last reason why you're here tonight. Show of, hand at the back.
Hey, it's Con. I'm working on some VR AR projects now. I'm really interested in talking about like the design and development pipeline, and like we kind of, I think, in screen-based design have some great sort of paradigms now for what we hand off to our developers, and I think I'm really interested in hearing about in the VR AR world, where's kind of that line where you can do a lot of low fidelity prototyping, but still great value for your developers and clients.
Great. So food for thought. So what I'll do now is I'll get each of the panelists to introduce their names, where they are in their career, and talk birth to today, how they got to where they are now, with a leaning towards VR. Take it away, Rob.
Hello everyone, I'm Robbie Tilton. I previously was on the Google VR team, and prior to that I was on the Google Glass team. I recently left Google. I've been on my own for about a month now, working on my own projects. You said from birth to now? That's a little...
You can interpret birth as being 18 if you like.
Okay. Just interrupt me if I'm going too long.
We've got all night.
So, I actually started out after college as a producer in the advertising world. We were working on a lot of Flash websites, banner ads, and through advertising I got to see a lot of really interesting prototypers, and they're working with really interesting visual programming tools like open frameworks and processing, and I got excited about that. And I saw an Arduino, and I saw people connecting an iPhone to a robot, and I was like, oh wow, like how the heck is anyone doing this? So at the time I looked at different graduate school programs, and I found a school in New York called ITP, which is part of NYU. And it's a 2-year graduate program, and they teach everything from art, science, and engineering. And from there, I got to learn all the tidbits of innovative tech that were interesting to me, and I got to apply it to what I was interested in. And at the time, it was non-traditional. I called it non-traditional displays, different types of 3D displays. So I worked with a bunch of different 3D display technology. I made a volumetric display, an auto stereoscopic display, basically a glasses-free 3D display. And I also made and designed an interaction system for a heads-up display. And at the time, basically like 1 week before I graduated there, Google Glass was announced. And I was like, oh, this is my dream project. This aligns exactly with what I'm interested in. So I ended up applying there, and it was lucky, or I feel like I was lucky to get the role. And I spent about 1.5 years on the Google Glass team helping design a new operating system. And toward the end of my time at Glass, I was talking with some friends who are at Google, just kind of seeing what else was out there. And the VR team was just forming. The Google Cardboard had been announced at one of the I/Os. And I got to try an early version of a Vive, and I think it was one of the like basic Vive demos that they had for free, where it's just like a robot standing, not even moving, and because I love everything 3D, as you know from what I just said before, I was really excited, and I talked to the team, and prior I was doing a lot of UX UI design and had to learn a lot of the VR skills on the job when I joined the VR team, which I was also very fortunate for, because now that the industry is a little further along, I think they expect more of candidates in terms of VR skills. At the time, I didn't have any VR skills. I could make prototypes in processing or JavaScript, and I knew how to design, but I didn't know how to 3D model, and I didn't know how to use Unity, and basically I spent about 2 years on the VR team making one VR app every week, and through constant practice and making, I learned how to make VR apps really quickly. I learned how to 3D model, learned how to rig and animate, and basically a lot of skills that are relevant to the field.
Great. David?
Hey, my name is David Moore. I'm currently one of the creatives at Zeus.com. I started design school like everyone else, went to Duke Ellington School of the Arts in Washington, D.C., in Georgetown. From there, I went to EMI doing pretty much similar things, basic Flash websites, banner ads, art directing like album covers and all that type of stuff. Then there was an opportunity to come out here and work at experiential marketing companies to do production work. I had no idea what that was at the time, but I said if it involves graphic design, I'm in, I'm sold, I'll go. So I packed up everything in my room. They said I had a flight the next day, and I flew out. It wasn't until I got on the plane where I was like, what am I doing? I don't know anyone out here, type of thing. But from there, it kind of grew into 10 years of doing massive projection mapping projects like Adobe Max at the Nokia Theater, LCD displays, Tomb Raider installations, Square Enix installations, things like that. And at the time, I was beginning to learn 3D modeling with the SketchUp program, if you guys know that. And back then, we were just using it to create 3D renders to send to clients so they could approve the model. We send it off to green space, and then they would build the installation. Then I met this little company called Helios, which is right around the corner, and they came over with this little black box of something called Oculus in it. And back then, it was just a developer kit. It looked like nothing really. And they take you through a couple of these 3 demos, right? So you get on the roller coaster, one's like you're on an island and you're traveling around. And I said, this is crazy. Like this, we're finally here. Like I just nerded out completely in front of the whole office. But what we began to do was take our SketchUp files, bring it into Unity, and build out our rough renders of installations. Next thing you know, we had our Square Enix booth completely in this universe, right? And we could have our clients come by throw on the Oculus Rift, and now they can experience it as if this thing was already built. And at that point, I knew this is something I want to do. How can we do more of this? When will this thing advance? And the bug just got me at that point. So from there, I began to just do more projection mapping jobs. I tried to get on every single project there was. Anything that involved Unity or anything that involved VR at the time, I tried to get involved in. And then eventually, I wanted to focus all of that on one product and kind of bring all that technology to startups, right? And eventually, I ran into Zeus. It was like serendipity, and we kind of gelled, and I said, "This is where I want to be." And they said, "Hey, I like you too." And and I was smitten from then. And then the 360, Facebook released 360 maybe a year earlier, but it was pretty expensive to get in. GoPro just launched that rig that was like 15 grand. It's tough trying to convince people to shell out that money on technology they're not sure it's going to convert. So about a year later, now we have like the Kodak Pix Pro and other things that you can rent for a few $100 and put together a whole production. So now these things become a little bit more palatable, right? And from there, we released our Vive 360 video, which just launched a week from today. So it's great.
Do you want to just briefly talk about the video? It's a 360 video.
Yeah.
So do you want to explain how it works? It's a video I can't actually show you because it's really good to see it on your actual cell phone. But if you want to briefly describe what it is.
So if you go to Facebook Lively app, you can watch it. But we ran into the same problem you were talking about earlier, where we were looking at. Well, first we had this new app coming out. It's a video dating app called Lively, and we wanted to think of a unique way to promote this product. Of course, it had to be video because it's a video dating app, but how do we do it that's not just a 16:9 vision video that every startup makes? Facebook had their 360 project out, and it was really gaining some traction, but we were noticing the same thing. It was just B-roll, repurposed content, or someone just putting a camera in the middle of the room. Jack in the Box actually did this, put a camera in the middle of a bar, and all you could do is just spin around and watch people at the bar, right? So we were thinking, how can we tell a story, an emotional story, of how people come together with this app? How can we tell that narrative? So we did this 360, but turned this like 180 and 180. So on your left side, you had the female's point of view and her daily activities. On the right-hand side, you had the male's point of view and his daily activities. And you're seeing how these two lives are similar, and then how they meet and kind of come together. And then from that point, the center line fades away, and you see how they come together. And it's also like an ode to San Francisco as well, and you'll see it in like the beauty shot. So you have the Facebook 360 version, and then you have the YouTube version, where if you press the little VR icon in the corner, you get a full like immersive 360 experience.
And because I know most people in the room haven't seen it, the two stories are going in parallel. So you look one way, you look around her bedroom, and then you hear him talking over here, so you look around his bedroom. And when they finally meet in the bar, the two worlds become one room. And actually David is hidden in the corner working on his Mac. Which is quite funny to see.
Let me know how many places you see me. I was bald at the time. So
Gabe?
Hey, cool. Hey guys, my name is Gabe Valdivia. I don't have such a great story, so sorry, I just kind of stumbled my way into VR, so bear with me. So I was born in Cuba, grew up in Costa Rica, and then moved here to study design. My background is mostly on 2D product design. I started doing print, then moved into advertising, marketing, and eventually found my way into product design. I moved into San Francisco and worked on a startup called Automatic. Eventually shipped that and joined Facebook about 3 years ago. At Facebook, I worked on business products, so Facebook pages, all the way to consumer-facing things, most notably photos. I worked on photos for a couple of years. And through photos, I was really kind of in love with storytelling, so much so that I moved to London last year to work on a product that promoted really long-form storytelling on Facebook. And it was after that that I kind of discovered 360 and VR media that I thought that's kind of like the next frontier for storytelling. So about a year ago, I joined the Facebook VR team, which is different than Oculus. So the Facebook VR team is a team focused on making Facebook products for VR, as opposed to Oculus, which is focused on making hardware and first-party apps for that. As part of that team, I worked on 360 Video when I first joined, and then because of my photos experience, they asked me to lead the introduction of 360 Photos into VR, which was launched earlier this year, and that was the first time we kind of introduced VR creation to the masses. So one big part of 360 Photos is that when you take a panoramic photo, we actually render that as a 360 photo on Facebook. So that means that anybody with a phone can actually create VR content, and really unlocks a bunch of opportunities for what you can create and how creative you can be with just the camera on your phone. So I launched that, and then learned a ton about the process, and ever since then I've been working on the Facebook VR team. It's been about a year now, learning everything from thinking in 3D. So my I wasn't born thinking like, oh, VR is gonna be great. So I was never really in that world. A lot of people in VR have backgrounds in architecture or industrial design. I don't. So it's been the process kind of transitioning from thinking about interfaces in a rounded rectangle in your hands to everything around you. So that's a lot of consideration of spaces and feeling of presence in the room, and using tools like Unity and 3D modeling tools. So yeah, that's where I am today. Kind of transition from 2D product design to VR product design.
Great, and great.
Hi, my name is Greg Madison. I'm an interaction designer specialized in augmented reality and virtual reality and mixed reality. A long time ago, I was magician illusionist for more than 20 years. So in a way, it was always obvious for me to mix reality and technology and illusion also. So in 2009, I was a worldwide finalist at the Microsoft Imaging Cup with a project named The Seventh Sense. It was a sort of HoloLens 7 years ago. And at this time, a R&D company spotted me and hired me, and I worked on mixed reality stuff with artificial intelligence and all this topic. And now I'm working at Unity on a project named Carte Blanche. It's an application to create VR worlds inside VR. It's not integrated to Unity, in fact, because the team is working on two projects, main projects. The first one is Editor VR, and Editor VR is for developer, designer, inside the editor, and Carte Blanche is outside for everyone. I really think that if you give tools to people, they will use to create new content, and we can't wait that for example, when you are looking the web, the greatest content, I think, comes from the people, not the developer who made the internet at the beginning. That's it.
So this was not meant to be an ad for Unity, but as you can see, Unity, where I work, every single thing is mentioned using Unity. So what is Unity? And I'll get back to why Unity is relevant in a moment. So Unity is, like I said earlier, a game engine platform. That's what it originally was. It can be used for a lot of 3D things. And it's actually free to download the personal edition. So there's no price attached to that. To get other features and so on, you do have to pay for it, but it is genuinely something that is accessible to everyone. And if you've ever used Flash, it's a slightly similar interface. So my first main question to the panelists is, so you've all described how you got into VR and how all of you sort of got into it a few years ago. Almost everybody in the room, except for the 3 people who have their hands up, is hoping to get into VR or wants to know how to get into VR. So now with the way things are now in the kind of, we're slightly past the Wild West era of VR, but still kind of somewhere out there in the territories. What do you think people should do if they want to get a career or job in VR? Starting with you, Rob.
So this is a tricky question. There's a lot of ways you can go about it, and I think the key is to ask yourself what you want to do. Do you want to make applications? Do you want to make entertainment experiences, social experiences, 360 video, mixed reality? There's really no good way to start anything, I think. So you just need to take what you're interested in and begin. And in regards to getting a job, part of what you potentially want to do, I can give an example that's more geared towards the world that I just came from. If you want to do UX, UI design at a company like Google, Facebook, I guess there's a lot of different parts of UI, UX design, but for example, if you're interested in figuring out teleportation mechanics and different UI affordances and how to show the controller and allow the user to travel through space, I think if you were to make a case study that shows off maybe 5 to 10 different ways that you can do this teleportation mechanic, and you present it in an articulate way, it would be highly enticing to one of these companies. In terms of reviewing people's portfolios who do apply, I very rarely see this. I think they give you a huge head start. And obviously it doesn't have to be teleportation, it could be whatever it is that you're interested in. But because the industry is still very young, but there are people with skills and knowledge in the industry, you do need to show something that that exemplifies you understand the field and you're bringing your design thinking into it, and that you can articulate and communicate your ideas and make them come to life and articulate why they're good or even if they're bad.
David?
I think you had a really good point there. It's figuring out first, what aspect of VR are you interested in? So I can probably come at it from a storytelling point of view, and from an agency point of view as well. So if you're coming at it with the mindset that I want to create 360 films, or I want to create something that tells this emotional story, I would begin to study film, right? For me personally, I like one-man films, right? Because there's only so many elements that you can use to tell this story. And if I was reviewing a portfolio that was specifically geared to doing something in VR, doing something in 360, I would like to see, a storyboard. It doesn't even have to be like a super crisp storyboard, but I want to know what is your thinking behind all this. If elements are going to come into frame, how are they going to come into frame? How are you going to be able to view them? How are you going to direct the user where they should look, right? Because in film in 69, it's super easy how you can direct someone, right? You only have so much space to do so. But if you have an infinite palette or a spherical world, how do you tell someone, oh, okay, now it's time to look left? Are you going to do it with sound? Are you going to do it with scenic? What are those plans? And then, if you are looking to get into it, and you do happen to work at an agency, I highly suggest starting to look at projection mapping. It's a little bit older than VR is, but it is on a low level like VR. You're taking someone out of their current space and kind of putting them within this different world, right? And in that world, how are you directing their eye? How are you directing the content? So those are just some things I would look for and kind of invite you to study.
Yeah, Facebook is a little bit different. So we don't really create much content. What we try to do is create utility for people and value for people, and that's one of the holes that we see in the industry right now, especially in VR. There's a lot of experiences, a lot of immersive experiences, a lot of games, but there's really not a lot of evidence of really thorough product thinking in VR quite yet, because it's so early. So a lot of things are really rough, whether it's visuals or actually thinking about a problem to solve. Those things are, it's really early in the industry right now, so the people that are thinking about that really stand out for us. So at Facebook we are we're interested in making products that reach 1 billion plus people. So our big concern is how do we get VR to get there? So what kind of efforts can we make to democratize VR so that it's not required to spend $1,500 on a computer and $500 on a headset, right? That diminishes your audience quite a bit. So can we create a compelling experience that is accessible to the big majority of the population? That's a pretty big challenge. So the people that are thinking like that immediately stand out to us, and that's kind of thinking that we're looking for in the Facebook VR team.
Right.
Can you repeat the question, please?
So the question is, things have changed since you all got involved in VR. So with the way the VR world is now, what do you recommend people in the room who want to get into VR? What should they start doing to maybe launch a career in VR, or get a job in VR, or what should they start doing or thinking about or creating?
I think that you don't need a big devices to buy everything. You can start with cardboard. We are prototyping a lot with cardboard. In fact, all what I'm doing, I'm not using a lot Unity. I'm using Photoshop, SketchUp, After Effects also, and a lot, again, of cardboard, paper, physical object. Because if it's working in the reality, normally it's also working in the virtual world. So what you can do so far today is create experiences with real object and find a developer to make it happen. But if you are a purely designer without coding, you can start today without any devices. This is
So bring it back to the real world,
yeah.
essentially. Okay, good advice. So my next question is, so let's get a show of hands. Who in the room here would be a graphic designer or a visual designer? Raise your hand. So roughly half the room. Who here would be, say, a UX designer? Maybe. Are there a few hands? So call out any other types of designer in the room. Product designer? Interaction designer? Architect? Very good. This is the AIA after all. Any other architects in the room? Highly relevant to architects? No, just the one. Two architects. Interesting. Any other type of designer we haven't mentioned? Illustration? Any photographers? No? Oh, was that just water? So all highly visual. So my next question would be, if you are a visual, probably 2D based for most part, except for the architects, what is the kind of mindset change that you should really think about? Like designing in 2D is a whole mindset. What's the 3D design mindset? How is it different? And how many skills are easily transferable? Starting with you, Robbie.
So, with the UX and product designers in the room, I think we often talk about screen density. The mobile screen density is much lower than, let's say, a TV or computer. In VR, you're designing a space rather than a screen, so it's much more apt for someone like an architect. So architects are great to collaborate with. So it's really considering how you draw and present, how you draw someone's attention and you present information in space. So obviously it's 3D. You can place things at different planes. If you place something flickering on the side to the left, someone's going to go over and look and see what that is. Different depths or different eye levels will change the sense of prominence or importance that a user will give to an item. In regards to the visual designers or graphic designers in the room, typography right now is really difficult in VR just because the screen resolutions are pretty bad. And nobody's really created the perfect spec for what's the perfect contrast ratio, if you have like a blue font, or if you're using white font, or whatever font it is, like what's the font size. In general, you have to make font sizes larger than you would expect, just because when you make them small, you see a little flickering in the screen. So I think there's a ton of opportunity for all of this, but again, the biggest difference is rather than interacting with something in like a panel, you're interacting with something in space.
David?
Again, I have to agree. Like a lot is transferable. I think the way product designers think transfers well into VR, meaning that they have to think of many different scenarios, right? So if your user does this, what happens? If your user does this, what happens? And VR is very much like that, I believe. What you want the viewer to do usually isn't like what they're going to do initially from the first time. Because for a lot of people, there's us in the room who are very familiar with VR, but a lot of people who are going to view your content, it's still probably going to be the first time they've ever experienced it. So they're probably not going to do what you would like them to do or what you feel is obvious, right? But a lot of the UX, UI, visual design principles still apply. It's just the way you think about them. Instead of having this little screen that you're working on, you now have this spherical space. So again, like you mentioned, how do you direct people in that space? How do you call attention to certain things? Those are things I think would transfer, and things I think are a little bit different.
Yeah, I actually just a bit of an optimistic point of view on this, because I think that a lot of the things would actually transfer quite easily. When you think about VR, you probably think like there are no limits, there are no constraints, that you can do anything around you. In reality, because it's so early, there's a lot of limits, there's a lot of constraints. And we shouldn't really underestimate the decades of design thinking that have gone into designing for screens, or before that for print. There's a lot of consideration there in terms of hierarchy and information architecture that we can actually borrow into VR, especially now where the input mechanisms are not as standardized. So some people experience VR with only gaze, while other people experience VR with full touch, like hand tracking. So I think defaulting to a lowest common denominator there is actually quite wise, because we have a lot of precedent already set. So I think considering the constraints as you think about VR, and if you're interested in VR when transitioning from 2D design, it's actually very helpful and liberating, right? Like, you really can't do everything. As soon as you try doing something and you put it on your face, you realize that it gives you nausea and you could throw up. So there's a lot of constraints that become very obvious very quickly. So I think embracing those constraints can become really empowering to start designing for VR.
That's a good point. There's a key frame rate, isn't there, in VR, that if you go any higher, people can have epileptic fits or throw up. So what's the frame rate? Is it 35?
It's 90, and it's if you go below, they get
Okay.
nauseous.
A key tip there. Greg?
Yes. I think that in VR you are not designing UI, but you are designing superpower for people. For example, in my project Carte Blanche, you have it's a metaphoric interface. You can bring a card, and on each card you have an object, and when you put this object on the table, you summon this object, and the object appears on this table. But if you bring this card near from your eyes, the text becomes bigger, because the meaning of why you are looking an object closely is to read, to have better readability, so the card expands like this. And if you can't read because you have some disability, you can put the card on your ear, and the card, the TTS voice, read the card for you. So this kind of superpower, you can create this stuff for all the objects inside the VR world. And this is the real difference between 2D application and 3D. You have a lot of data, you know where people are looking, what they are saying, and this kind of stuff. And it's a new paradigm. You have to be inside the head of people to understand what they are thinking, what they are looking for, and so on. Because you have a lot of new information to create a whole incredible scenario.
And that's an interesting point you make. Has anyone in the room used Tilt Brush at all? Good show of hands. So for those who haven't used it, it's amazing because you put on the headsets, you paint a picture, then you step into the picture, and you continue painting all around you. So you have this, what seems like an endless painting that you're now inside, which for somebody like me who originally graduated as an illustrator, it's kind of an amazing experience. But also to kind of summarize what all four of you are saying, it's a bit like creating a movie where you're highly directing visual cues and sound and a sense of space and depth. Or, as this is where my nerd part of it comes out, I used to play a lot of role-playing games like Dungeons & Dragons, where you're creating a story that is somewhat highly directed, but you give the actual players a sense that they have complete freedom to go anywhere they want, but you're sort of somehow steering them back to the story. And the key is to try and make them feel like they're not being steered, that they have that unlimited choice. It's kind of like a combination of those two skills in a third new thing. So with that in mind, then I'd love for you guys to talk about the actual hardware, the physical hardware, not just the software, we won't mention Unity. The actual hardware, the different, basically the race to get the ultimate system, a bit like the old VHS versus Betamax race from back in the late 70s, early 80s. Like every single physical device wants to be the one that becomes the one that everyone uses. And it's highly timely, as PlayStation just released their PlayStation VR, and tomorrow Facebook is releasing their Daydream View for $79, so probably one of the cheapest non-Google Cardboard devices out there. So if you'd like to talk just a little bit about, say for example, if somebody in the room wants to get into VR, they can download Unity or other engines for free, but they might need a device. What is your take on the devices, the actual physical, tangible objects?
Right, so as a consumer and designer, you're in a difficult position because there's a crazy amount of VR headsets on the market right now. There's no clear winner. My take on it is you should buy a Vive. I think the Oculus and touch controllers are also very good, but if you can afford a Vive, I would buy a Vive. I think in general, if you want to build a cardboard app, you can also like simulate a cardboard with a Vive, or sorry, a Daydream app. You could simulate a Daydream with a Vive, or whatever it might be, an Oculus app. I think things are headed towards room scale and 6-self or spatially tracked controllers. So I think the Vive just puts you in a really good position as for your designs to be future-proof. I understand a Vive and a Windows machine is very expensive, and I don't want to say that Vive or Oculus with Touch is your only answer. You can definitely do amazing things with a Daydream headset or a Gear VR, and those are great, and they actually reach a larger customer base. So you have to think about what you're trying to get out of what you're doing. If you want to do maybe future designs that are going to be future-proof, I'd recommend a Vive or Oculus with Touch. If you're trying to launch a product and get it to as many people as possible, I'd recommend a Daydream View or Gear VR.
Yeah, and I come from a world where we want our content to reach as many people as possible. So my plan right now is to design for like the Gear, the Daydream, even down to the cardboard, like something that everyone can have access to immediately, and it doesn't take like a steep learning curve or a steep purchase curve to purchase or to get. The Vive though, on the other hand, if you can get it, get it. Like I went to experience it at Helios not too long ago, and it's just incredible. Like it's one of the few experiences where I did feel present in the environment. It was just a trip, and to see like coworkers interacting with it as well, they instantly get, oh, this is VR. This is what we've all been talking about. So I found that to be something.
Yeah, this is actually an interesting kind of debate between VR purists. Some people think that in order to have truly a VR experience, you need hand tracking for it to work. So that's, if you believe that, then your options are the Vive or the Oculus with touch controllers. There's another side, which is 360 media, and some people don't think of that as VR. For 360 media, you can actually start today with a phone. You can use the, whatever prototyping tool you're comfortable with, whether it's Framer or Origami or something like, and use the phone gyroscope to track kind of like panning around the 360 sphere, and that is not quite the promise of VR, but it is the thing that most people will have access to in the next couple of years. So that maybe it depends on what type of experience you want to create. You want to create something that it is forward-thinking and very experiential, then you can go with the hand tracking. If you want to create something that is relevant today and pushes the technology for the next couple of years, then something like 360 media is it might be a consideration. And for that, the entry bar is pretty low. So any phone with a gyroscope will do that.
The question is very difficult because everybody has different expectation, of course. So in my case, I prefer the Rift with touch because it's the most convenient. You can not a lot of cable for the headphone and so on. So yeah, but I think it's a non-question because you mentioned Betamax. Who remember what is Betamax? Yeah. Of course, but the content made for the Betamax still exists. But so the focus on the content, not on the device. Yeah, because we know that in the future we need hand and body tracking and so on. So if you have to do something today, touch, Oculus, Vive, it's okay. But if you are looking for a scenario in 5-10 years, you can expect to have full body tracking, eye tracking, everything. I think that the imagination will be the limits.
Actually, that brings up a good point. What are your opinions on VR 5 years from now? Where do you think it will be? Robbie, take it away.
So I think the hands and spatially tracked controllers will be really important. I think they'll become mandatory for augmented reality as well. So in general, as a designer, I really care about these as a designer trying to kind of push UI components and paradigms. In VR, I care about these controllers a lot, or seeing your hands. What other part of the question was it?
So 5 years from
5
now,
years
what will
VR.
the landscape of VR be like? Would this panel discussion be entirely in VR?
Maybe.
Potentially.
I think a lot more players are going to come out in the next few years. I think in order for VR to take real consumer hold, there needs to be really fantastic content. And I think that's going to happen. So I think we're going to have a lot of really great creativity applications, social applications, and education applications. And there'll be a few headsets that kind of surface themselves as the winners, and we have no idea who those will be.
Hopefully we see the feedback kind of ramped up a bit. How your body receives feedback from the environment that you're in this VR space. But I think that's going to help a lot with tracking. It's going to help a lot with the sickness that people sometimes feel with these VR experiences. And in 5 years, I think that, or at least I hope that we see it more in the medical and educational fields. I think it has a really, really huge role to play in those areas. And if we do see advancement there, it will see it on a commercial level as well, because now it's showing real value and it gives it staying power. I mean, of course, and it's also a benefit to humanity type of thing. But that's why I think it really has the potential to grow and solidify itself just in the education system and in the
Yeah, related to that, I think any industry that is making 3D content on a 2D interface today will switch to VR in 5 years. So whether you're an architect or an industrial designer or a 3D modeler, those things are a lot easier to do in VR as a utility because there is no translation, you're literally just doing it, especially with hand tracking. So I see it becoming a norm in those industries. I also see VR transitioning from experiences and then spectacle to like social utility. So like teleconferencing in VR could be prevalent in 5 years. So I think we still have a lot of work to do to make it mainstream, and I think there's a parallel question of when will AR become mainstream, and I think it's a debate which one will come first. But I think for sure utility in medical fields or education or 3D industries will be relevant for sure.
I think that in the future we're gonna have just one devices doing mixed reality, no VR, no AR, a mix of both. Because as an interaction designer, I can say that people expecting something like that, you want it to be in the real world, but sometimes you want to be outside the world when you want, not shifting or doing another headset. So, and I think it's a race for Apple, for any other big company to do a device like this, because if you are doing that, you will bring the biggest part of the cake, so of the market. Yeah, 5 years mixed reality device.
So those 2 points kind of lead me on to another question, which is, so we've talked a lot about VR, but what about AR, which is sort of VR and sort of 2D? Where do you think that's going to go from here?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask for this. I, in general, currently am not a huge believer in AR. I think the use cases are pretty weak currently, and AR-specific hardware could supplement them. For example, I think driving directions, or directions in general, is the strongest use case AR has. And I think a specific windshield in a car that could show AR information would be much more, a much better product than like glasses that you wear that present AR. I know everyone disagrees with me on this, and I hope I'm proven wrong, so I'll let everyone else answer.
That could be your first pet project as you, the designer, on your own.
I'm not going to have to repeat my same answer is the medical and educational field. Like I can easily see a med student, practicing a suture or something like that using AR, without having to risk, injuring a cadaver or something like that, But being able to kind of go through these processes and learn these things with everything right there in front of them, and being able to interact, make mistakes, start over, with all these displays in front of them to figure out where they are within a certain process, I think would be hugely beneficial there. Like, I was messing around with the HoloLens not too long ago, and just being able to walk out in the room and come back and the elegance still be there is just, I think there's huge potential there. So, we'll see.
Yeah, we're just gonna repeat the same answer. I think there's room for redefining AR a bit. So there's already earpieces that kind of augment what you listen to, and that could arguably be AR as well. So anything that kind of changes your senses and augments them could be considered AR. So I see a lot of uses for people with disabilities where AR could be a huge leap forward. I think in order to become what it is promised to be today, the tech needs to do a lot more than what we have. And that will take a slow transition. I think it's inevitable. I don't know if it will take 5 years, it might take more. But with the rise of artificial intelligence and VR becoming more commoditized and AR tech getting better and better, I think maybe it will take maybe 10 years for the Google Glass promise to become a reality.
Yeah. No, I really, you completely right, and I think that the biggest problem today with augmented reality, the technology is not there at all. But all the progress we made with augmented reality, virtual reality, will help to have something more robust for the tracking, for the display, and so on. So I think that the that would be fast in the following months, maybe with Magic Leap and okay.
Bringing magic back into it. So I know that there is, sorry, I'm not sure if this mic is working, but I'll still hold it like a prop. There is, I know, a program in VR that teaches doctors to actually travel inside the human body so they can see, you know, the veins and so on, and actually understand how the body works. There is countless architectural ones. I know when we were at Unite, which is Unity's big conference last week in LA, somebody came up to us and said, I've just got this big military contract. I can't tell you what it's for, but I need 50 VR developers. And like, do you have any? And we're like, well, we don't really just have them on the shelf. We just sort of, you know, the community grows organically. And that kind of ties into my next point. So mentioning Unity, hopefully for the last time tonight, we've actually just launched a site called Connect, which allows people who use Unity or anyone related to the gaming industry to connect up with each other. It's just connect.unity3d, I think, or unity.com. But essentially, it's like LinkedIn, but for Unity or the gaming world. So it's completely free. Go there. You can actually post jobs. You can post freelance jobs as well. We're calling it the micro job economy. So we basically created it because so many people everywhere we go ask us, okay, it's great, you're Unity. I'm not really so interested in the new stuff you're doing. I just want to find Unity developers. How do I find them? So that is the place to go. And that nicely segues into my last question, which is what kind of, which I think this mic is working, what jobs do you feel are in the future of VR, and where should people look? Like, apart from Connect, which is only a week old, where traditionally do people look for VR jobs or Unity or Unreal jobs? Like, what are the places you would go to look for people?
So, I think companies are more and more interested in having small VR departments. So I think there's a lot of companies that exist that you may assume they don't have a VR department, but maybe they do. Maybe they're interested in starting one. A lot of universities also help the students get connected with potential employers. And I know everyone's at a different point in their career. There's programs, online classes like Udacity, and I know they do a really good job of connecting their students with people in industry. Besides that, I would just really recommend going to meetups, going to things like this. I think you guys are all already putting yourselves in a good position. And the VR community is pretty small, and everyone's really friendly, and I think if you just reach out to people who you think are doing interesting work or companies that you would be interested in working for, they'd be pretty receptive.
Yeah, I would have to agree to go to meetup, design talks, things like that, but I would also invite you to look at agencies, and not like advertising agencies, but more experiential marketing agencies. So you have Kenwood Experiences, which is out in SF, you have GPJ, you have Midnight Oil, companies like that who are doing crazy immersive projects, whether it's projection mapping or it's VR. But there'll either be someone in-house doing it, or they'll be working with a smaller studio who's doing it too. So you'll be able to possibly be a creative director on those products. So if you aren't working in VR directly, you'll be building a foundation to work in it in the very near future. Agencies will definitely push you to do that type of stuff.
So the question is, if in the future, where will people find VR jobs?
Future or now?
If you have
Either.
if you
Basically,
have skills, you will find a job.
where are people finding the jobs in VR? Might be an easier way of putting it.
Got it. Yeah, so I think if you have VR skills, the jobs will come to you. So the hardest part is acquiring those skills, because there's really like less than 100 people in the world that can actually design for VR. So if you're interested, just Unity is free, so I'll give it a try. And if you like it, then keep trying, and then eventually a job will come to you. I'm pretty sure. I think the more and more we make it mainstream, anybody that's interested in content creation will have a VR department, just like people had a mobile department 5 years ago. So what we're doing right now is really just paving the way for the next 5 years where it will become a necessity, right? I do think that as a designer right now, you're required to understand mobile if you're working on anything digital. And I think in the next 5 years, you will be required to treat VR as another platform that you need to design for. But if today, because 5 years before then, all you need to do is satisfy your curiosity and acquire VR skills, and the jobs will come to you.
Yeah, it's a good point. Acquire a VR skill. The only thing is put your hand inside an engine like Unity or Unreal or whatever, and because so far there are not a lot of VR designer, but there are a lot of designer, of course. You have to make a demo, something working, and that you can show. The expectations so far by the company are not very big, so you can make the illusion that you are good in VR. So,
So it's a low-hanging fruit, a quick one.
I know. I did.
So what you're all saying is there's very few VR designers. So unlike, say, regular design, mobile interaction, UX, product, and so on, instead of you chasing the jobs, I'm going to bring that harpoon back into this. You're essentially the whale out there that the actual people are trying to chase you and harpoon you and pull you back in. So I had to use that metaphor because I'm never going to be in a room with a harpoon again. So it's a great place to be for designers, as the bar to entry is quite low, yet the expectation is, or the expectation, the final thing is quite high, and you'll have to sort of work it out in between, just like everybody else. So there is no science to it yet. There sort of is, but it's less defined as a new medium, essentially.
New and not in the same time. For example, my binôme worked in VR since 20 years. She got his VR PhD since 20 years. So it's not very new, but we are on the top of a new wave, clearly.
Yeah. So with that in mind, that ends the kind of the main question session. So now I'm going to throw it open to you guys. I'm sure now that you have heard so much about VR, a lot of the technical stuff, and a lot of the more broad stuff, like focus on the story or the content. So who here has a burning question? I see a lot of hands. I'll sort of try and dart back and forwards. Lady with the glasses.
So I'm interested in empathy. I read a few years ago how they put the headsets on the World Economic Forum attendees, a Syrian refugee story, and it instantly moved them to action. So if you were Spider-Man and you're using your powers for good, what would you do in VR now, especially in light of interesting world events, to maybe make the world more empathetic or move people to action?
Who would like to take that?
I'm actually working with a friend of mine, Brian Herzog, who actually helped me on this Lottie video. We wanted to build this VR experience where we were kind of going through the whole gentrification process and kind of seeing both sides of that story, right? And how there really isn't a bad guy on either side, but both people trying to survive. So you have the option to kind of you're sitting at a table with a family at dinner and all that, and you're going through one experience and you're going through another, and it forces you to kind of put yourself in this other person's shoes and kind of see someone as a human being going through a human experience, as opposed to this esoteric, like, evildoer type situation. And I think it just brings everyone back to humanity, which I think is kind of sorely needed, like especially like right now. So, so that's how I would answer that.
Anyone else?
One thing I would add
I'd offer you mine, but it's dead.
So what I would add is that the audience that uses VR right now is very specific. So you can use that as your advantage to relay a message. So it's very much white male gamers who use VR, who are very wealthy by the big majority. And that's something we're trying to change as the technology becomes more and more accessible. But maybe that's something you can consider, to use their perspective to illustrate a different one for them.
Robbie, I think you had a point there at the end, or
I was just gonna add that I think social spaces where you can connect with people that are very different from you in states, in countries that you'd never be able to meet, and have real conversations and relate to them and have fun with them, I think that in general will help a lot. I think a lot of people are secluded from each other, and they just assume there's more differences than common things.
do you have anything to add, Greg? Okay. Gentleman with the red shirt, you had a question.
Yeah, definitely. I guess it's less about design, but about talking about VR, working in VR. I recently read this book, Ready Player One. I don't know if you guys have heard of it, but it talks about a VR, almost dystopian future where there's a lot of poverty and people just feel down and they're looking for escapism. I am extremely excited about VR. When I talk to others about VR, the first thing they think about is they think about like that dystopian future. So when you talk to others and they bring that up, like what is your response to this dark vision that might come up?
It's the same thing with robots, with new technology in general.
Yeah.
So the thing is, people always think that will be a source of issues, problems, but I think that with good designer, that will be a part of the solution. Connect people will also connect people. They have the solution to make this disappear.
Yeah. So what I would say is that that's what we're here for, to make sure that doesn't happen. Because, like you said, that's usually the concern for every new technology. And sometimes we are able to appease that concern, and sometimes we're not. But I think VR is unique, that it really has the potential to break down physical distance as a barrier to connecting with other people more than the internet ever could. And that, doing it at the fidelity that you can do in VR is really, really powerful for achieving a really empathetic world. And that, to me, is the opposite of dystopia. So if we bring that design sensibility to this new technology, I think we can prevent that from happening.
I have to agree. Like, VR right now has the potential. Like just what you see on Facebook right now, which is still just the beginning. Has already done so much to bring people together in sort. Most of these videos are only maybe 2 minutes long, but the amount of people that connect on these things and the time it takes to do that is just incredible. And I can only see that as being a positive moving forward. We're more connected now than we ever been, and it's up to us, everyone in here, to develop content that kind of pushes those ideals forward. And I think you guys are already on the right track doing that, asking the right questions. So I think with all of us keeping that in mind, that'll be a small concern.
Anything to add, Robbie? Okay. And I think with your question, everything that's new seems to have a utopian and a dystopian view at the same time. And the dystopian view, because I like science fiction dystopias too, like, it's such a compelling story. It's like, oh my God, the future is a scary place, but this one thing might change everything. So that too is a common thread in all new technologies. I see a question behind you there.
Yeah, I'm curious, Robbie, so you just left Google. Do you have an intention of staying in VR or moving on to something else? And I guess for all of you, do you see VR as a place you'll stay for a while, or are you already looking ahead to kind of the next new exciting opportunity? What do you think that new kind of opportunity for you guys would be?
I'm currently working on something VR related, so I definitely believe in VR still, and I think it has a good potential, and I think it's all about content and trying to make great content.
In the same way, where the internet was seen as a solution to everything, but people kept saying you have to have content and then deliver it through the internet. Sorry, David?
I think I'm really excited about VR right now. At the core, I'm a tinkerer. So before this, it was projection mapping, and before that it was working on the web. So, and now I'm really excited about HoloLens and AR. So, and AI as well. It's another big passion of mine. So I think moving forward, whatever I can create a genuine experience in, I'm going to be involved in some way somehow. So.
Are you hiring? Just kidding. No, so I think that the skills you need today to learn VR will be relevant for the next decade or two. So if and when AR becomes really popular or mixed reality becomes really popular, those skills that those design skills that we're practicing today will be very relevant to transition to that technology. So for me, what's exciting is that as a designer, I've been focused on humanizing technology since I started working, and that first started with things like websites, then mobile, and now into things like VR and artificial intelligence. So I think that we're just getting started there. So to jump ship to a different industry right now, I think would be a missed opportunity because there's a lot to explore. We're just scratching the surface.
As a magician illusionist, my ultimate goal is alternative reality. Today we are in VR, after that AR, after that mixed reality, and after that alternative reality. Yeah. Did you see Doctor Strange? I want to offer that to everyone. This is my main mission.
With the gentleman with the baseball hat.
Oh, yes, it's a lively hat too. Thank you for being here. I have some questions, and to preface that, I'm going to say that I'm a gamer and I love VR. But part of me is also pretty skeptic that this can appeal to the general audience. And part of that is because VR is much like a two-sided market where you're trying to seed both the content creators and the content consumers. And doing both is really hard. So my first instinct is like, why aren't we doing VR for enterprise and then making them really expensive, making them really good, and then finding a way to make them really cheaper for the general consumers? So like once you have the money, once you have the talent going on the creation side, why not worry about like the consumer side afterwards? Kind of like makes sense that way. Kind of like the Tesla model that you're seeing where you make really awesome, expensive cars and then find a way to bring them to the general audience. So my question to you is, what are your thoughts on enterprise versus consumer focus in the beginning of VR? And do you think there's going to be a shift in the focus in the industry?
Who would like to start?
I think that's what we're doing. Aside from the enterprise part, the VR technology right now is very expensive. And I don't think it can sustain itself under that price point. And right now, you know, it's tethered to a PC that's very powerful and it's clunky, and it's like designing for the iPhone in like 2005. So we're like a couple years from a major breakthrough where it really goes into the mainstream. So from my perspective, that's kind of like in the established in the contract. Like the work we're doing is by definition to a small audience of people that will prove to be valuable and then evangelize to the big majority.
Yeah, I would have to agree. Like, you got me. I would have to agree. I think the lowest barrier to entry right now is 360 video, and that's something that everyone can do and experience. But right above that, it's pretty difficult to get in. Like you mentioned, you have to have a computer that can handle the information. Just with Oculus, like you can't even like use it with like an Apple computer, really. So all these things have to be worked out, and then we'll see it consumer level. I think that it'd still be a while right now. I think the people that will value it most would be like your industrial designers or your home developers, things like that. That's where I see it flourishing right now, and then maybe a few years later, everybody will have one. But I think that's still going to be a little ways away.
Yeah, I'll just agree with everything. It's a chicken egg problem. You need to have great content to have people buy the product, to lower the product's price, and that's what everyone's trying to do. Gear VR, Daydream View, they're at a low price point, they're only going to get better, and we just need to have good content for people to continue to buy them to prove there is demand for it. And enterprise, I think, is great, and a lot of people are working on that. If you're interested, I would encourage it. I think that's a great path as well.
Another question? Oh, hand raised with the hat.
Just curious, how does the design process compare to 2D, like in terms of brainstorming
I'd say the biggest difference is, at least when I was working on 2D design, you kind of get quick enough with the tools where you can sketch in the tools, whether it be Sketch or Photoshop. So you do a bunch of like gray box illustrations, and then you can like fill them out and test them out. I think with VR, since the tools are younger, it's a bigger hurdle to actually get it in VR. So the sketching of a VR application usually happens with pen and paper. I think that's the biggest difference for me. A lot of pen and paper drawings and kind of like talking about like putting cardboard, pieces of cardboard and sheets of paper up to see if this thing's worth building.
Yeah, I agree with that. Actually, I've worked with people that use like IKEA lamps that are like a sphere around you and put UI inside it. So like you get really crafty and really improvisational. So I think from my experience, I spent a lot of time trying to understand Unity. So keep working. No.
He's not paying to say that.
Yeah, so trying to figure out how to make stuff interactive is quite hard because it's very code intensive. So a lot of times in forums or Stack Overflow or Googling things, so I can copy paste it to the Unity code editor. So it's a lot messier than it is with 2D right now, where like the tools have gotten really sophisticated, and I would say you can even sketch in Origami or Framer really easily. So that's pretty mature, where in VR we are a few years behind. So yeah, I think it's just a lot messier, and you should probably not be intimidated by not knowing how to do something.
Yeah, just to piggyback on that, yeah, don't be afraid of like not doing something just because you don't necessarily have a process. So we were doing the Lobby 360 video, and we just sketched out storyboards just like you would any other film. The difficult part came when it was trying to explain each scene, right? Because you're working with people who don't necessarily, this is a new technology, right? So how do you explain, oh, well, if they turn around this way, they'll see this, and at this second, they can turn around and see that. So that was us walking into a process that we didn't completely understand, and we didn't completely figure out how to convey like what was really happening in the scene. So a way to kind of work around that was taking the entire office to Helios to experience it for themselves, and then coming back to our pitch and saying, now this is what happens in this scene and this scene, and it just kind of made explaining that and telling the story a little bit easier. It wasn't 100% there, but it was there enough that they trusted the vision and produced the film. So.
And in that in particular, there's actually good audio cues when you're in it. So if you keep looking at one person's story, there's two stories in parallel, you keep hearing sounds from the other scene, so you turn around and you get involved in the other scene. And then when you get engrossed in that, you hear something back from the first scene, and you keep actually moving around. The soundscape, so to speak, is very good.
Yeah, that's one of the first things we were trying to figure out how to do, because we're telling two stories at the same time. And the challenge was, with minimal text and all that, how do you direct people? So one of the things we tried to do was, like you mentioned, audio cues. So when one scene begins to wrap up on your left, on the right-hand side, the scene picks up. And also allowing the characters to run the scene in the background of the scenic are kind of like your eye candy. So you can look around freely and see your little Easter eggs here and there, take in the area, but allowing the audio track to kind of tell you which way to look and what time to pay attention to the action. So using that as opposed to elements flying in from everywhere like you kind of attempted to do with 360.
So it's getting back to that point of being channeled, but feeling you're actually free to do it at the moment. So I'm going to take a question from this side now. Any questions? In the front?
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about the devices and the spaces in which we use them. It's kind of a lot of things at once. So one thing is, have you seen experiences where while you're in VR you can detect other people who are in the VR experience with you, or other people who are just passersby? Another thing, have the spaces been considered? So like there are playgrounds that are covered in foam, for example, or like bumper cars where people sit up with each other. And then the headset thing that you're using, it's kind of crazy that you basically have a screen really, really close to your face. So there's got to be something better, and there's that bridge between that and Google Glass. which you have been, it sounds like, completely disillusioned by. And I'd be curious to know why that was, and are there devices that are kind of like VR headsets, but that don't use the phone, that maybe would cost, you know, millions of dollars, but would be really slim and would be, you would be able to interact with them. Discuss.
For the social thing with the VR with multiple people in the same room, I would just check out, there's a lot of research in academia that's happening that shows this off. One lab is Ken Perlin's MRL lab, so I'd check that out. It's some really interesting stuff. In terms of like glass was a peripheral, not an AR device. So I'm not going to blame glass on my disillusion of AR. I just have been thinking about the use cases a lot and debating with people, and I just feel like the use cases are thin. And just to be completely frank, I didn't believe in VR also for a long time until I saw room scale spatially tracked VR. I thought, oh, who's going to have like a empty white room to use VR in, and that's when the Oculus first came out, and then when technology got good enough, I was like, this is amazing, and I was completely wrong. So I'm totally open to be proven wrong again for that also.
Check Neverblind in VR by Dassault System. It's
Sorry, can you repeat that?
sorry.
Can you repeat that?
Can you repeat the name?
Neverblind in VR. Dassault System. Yeah, it's a mix between virtual reality and Kinect, so you can see your body and also all the people in the room. And I tried that. It's really amazing. And your body is in a cloud of dots, but whatever, your brain is doing the rest. You know where your body is, and you can interact naturally with people in the room, even if you have a helmet on your head. It's really good.
Yeah, there's also a company out here called Upload VR, and they're actually doing that right now. They have a shared workspace that houses all these different little VR companies in there, and some of them are doing. They have all these like VR rooms, and you go in, and they do have social virtual reality rooms. You can kind of see people. I'll give them their avatars, but there are people working in there right now trying to solve these problems.
And I would also say Microsoft's HoloLens, it actually projects onto the room you're
Yeah, it's
in
that.
as well.
Yeah, most spaces are quite small, and it feels like you need like a gymnasium to experience it.
Maybe in 5 years.
Well, the HoloLens that we kind of messed with not too long ago was in a space smaller than this. It was like a little tiny dance studio, and it was we were solving a murder mystery. And so on the wall there were clues and things like that. So I think you can make it work in a relatively small room. It's just where it is right now is kind of like where Oculus was 5 years ago. So it's getting there.
And if you think about it, before there was a TV, there wasn't a TV room in a house. And in every house has a TV room. So maybe 20 years from now there'll be a VR room.
I'll be happy to have one.
I was at another VR event in San Francisco, and everyone was all over the place trying VR headsets, like upstairs, downstairs, in little rooms, and it was kind of like a room of zombies, or like it was like an opium den, and it was kind of just like looking around, like holding these headsets. It's like, what's the planned interaction?
Cool. So as we head towards finishing up, I would just love to have each of our panelists give one. I'm not sure what's happening with the mic. It's kind of funny now. Just one final tip or key nugget of information or wisdom to impart that people will hopefully take away with them and go, oh, I remember that panel 5 years ago, he said, blah, blah, blah. That's guided my career all these years. Or maybe not.
I would just say, at least for me, all my success that I've had is just through practice and hard work. So if you want to enter the VR industry, just practice, 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 and you'll have stuff to show, and you'll get a job. Wherever your life wants to take you, do what you're interested in, and practice as much as you can.
In VR, I would say one, the viewer's never gonna look where you think they're gonna look at first, and two, just keep experimenting. I think everything you learn can be transferred into whatever medium you're passionate about. If you're passionate about it, you'll find a way to make it work. So just keep having experiences, keep experimenting with new technology, and like you said, keep practicing in hard work.
Cool. My advice is not for 5 years from now, it's for 4 years from now. It's don't vote for Trump again. So I think the simplest thing I can recommend is just try it. You might not like it, so try it. It's free, and see what you think. The barrier of entry is like the lowest out of probably any industry that I can remember. And there's a lot of enthusiasm and a lot of support from the community. And there's a lot of hype right now for VR, a lot of varying experiences of VR. So just give it a try and see if you like it. And if you do, I think there's a great future ahead of you.
And the last word, Greg.
Yeah, I think that if you want to create your first VR application, just try to convert your passion into something, whatever is your passion, could be Pokemon or something else, less obvious, but into an VR experience. Try to understand what will be the value to push this stuff inside VR, because I think that a lot of big companies are making a mistake to use VR because it's trendy, but there are no value at all. You have to really find why people will spend 8 hours a day in your stuff, what you will create in VR. And if you are using your passion, I think that the other person with the same passion will understand why you are doing that.
And just before we wrap up, a lot of the time after these discussions, some people want to continue the conversations, whether it's attendees or panelists. So I and anyone who wants to come with me will go to Murphy's Pub, which you go out the ground floor, turn right, then turn right again. You'll see a giant neon red sign that says Murphy's Pub. Everyone is welcome. And on that final note, I'd like everyone to put their hands together for our wonderful panelists tonight.